guys, Joshua Neal here, and today I'm going to show you a quick little tapping riff that you can work into songs with your band or your practice routine or anything you want to do. It's really easy to get this one together. It doesn't require a whole lot of practice. It takes advantage of the natural position that your fingers tend to sit in, and it sounds pretty cool, pretty evil and chaotic if you get it up to a higher speed, which is why I like to call it the Chaos Riff. Now, if you're not familiar with tapping, it's the practice of, rather than fretting a note and plucking it, you're simply going to hammer your finger down on the string, much like a hammer-on, to get the note to speak. So instead of plucking it, I'm just tapping it. That would be one-handed tapping. This riff is going to take advantage of two-handed tapping, using the fingers on your left hand and your right hand both on the fingerboard, kind of like a piano, to get this riff to go down. Now, when I'm doing these kind of tapping riffs, especially when I'm recording, I like to use one of these guys. This is actually called a fret wrap. It's made by a company called Groove Gear. And if you've ever seen other bass players who do this kind of tapping, Victor Wooten is a big proponent of two-handed tapping. You'll notice him, as well as a lot of shred-style guitar players, will use this this kind of technique as well. A lot of them, at least in the old days, they would just go to the drugstore and get one of those scrunchies that you would use for your hair and feed it over the neck and just leave it sitting on the end of the headstock, and when they need it, they would just bring it up. Groove Gear came up with this fret wrap, which actually has a Velcro clip on the back. I can actually come straight over the strings and Velcro it on. And what this does is it mutes the open strings without me having to do it physically, so that I don't get a lot of extraneous noise or a lot of extraneous ring outs. So right now all my strings are just muted out, and it allows me to, when I tap a note, as soon as I take my finger away, the string is dead. I don't need to worry about muting it. That leaves both my hands free to do whatever I want them to do without having to worry about muting. If I don't have this on, and this thing just slides up and down, which is awesome, it goes right into the open string, I would have to keep my finger on the string to physically mute it, as opposed to bringing it up, and it's nice and dead like that. So this, again, I call it the Chaos Riff. It's hard to incorporate this in a musical fashion. I mostly use it as a noisemaker, although it is very useful if your guitar player is doing one of these big tritone chords where they're just going up a string and over a fret for each of them. I'm sure a lot of you have used that sound or heard that sound before. If you've ever heard Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, that takes advantage of that particular riff. But this is easier to incorporate in a musical setting if you use it when your guitar players are doing these tritone shapes. And this also takes advantage of something called the diminished cycle, or diminished chords in general, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But the idea behind this riff is we're going to be playing a full octave or two tritones stacked on top of each other, which are going to cover an octave. And I'm going to do that with my left hand and my right hand as well. So for example, I'm going to be doing this on the 9th fret here. The 9th fret of the A string with my left hand will be on the 9th fret, the 10th fret of the D string, and the 11th fret of the G string. And with my right hand, I'm going to use this exact same shape. Notice those are the same, but I'm going to put my first finger of my right hand on the 12th fret of the A string. I'm going to put my middle finger on the 13th fret of the D string and my ring finger on the 14th fret of the G string. So I've got 9, 10, 11 here, and I've got 12, 13, 14 here. Now what I'm doing here is I'm taking advantage of a special quality of diminished chords. A fully diminished chord, or a fully diminished 7th chord, consists entirely of minor thirds, which means it is a fully symmetrical chord. I'll give you a better idea. cool thing about these symmetrical chords, and I'm going to talk about a different symmetrical chord later in the lesson, is that because they're consisting only of one interval, they're entirely minor thirds. Put very, very simply, there are only 3 diminished chords in the entire musical language. There's the C diminished chord, the C sharp diminished chord, and the D diminished chord. And after that, everything else is exactly the same. The E flat diminished chord, even though the notes would be named a little differently, it contains the exact same pitches as the C diminished chord. And the E natural diminished chord contains all the same pitches as the C sharp diminished chord, and the F diminished chord contains all the same pitches as the D diminished chord, and so on down the line. So what this allows me to do is construct these large symmetrical tapping riffs, and I can actually do this cool little sequence that I'm going to show you, and it'll all contain, even though I'm moving the chords around, it'll all contain the same basic notes, and it'll all fit in nicely over this chord, especially again if your guitar player is doing this 3-finger large tritone type chord. So what I'm doing when I'm starting on the 9th fret and the 12th fret here is I'm positioning my hands a full minor third apart. A minor third in terms of frets is 3 frets. So if I'm starting with my first finger of my left hand on the 9th fret, I'm going to put the first finger of my right hand on the 12th fret. If I've got my middle finger on the 10th fret, the other middle finger goes on 13, and if this third finger is on 11, this third finger is going to go on 14. I'm just going up 3 frets like that. You'll notice. That's our fully diminished chord right there. And I can throw the third on top of it there. Just to complete the sequence there. Now what I like to do with this particular riff, and this is what makes it very easy to execute, is I'm always going to go left hand finger, right hand finger, and they're generally going to be the same fingers. The most basic version of this riff that you can use would be first finger, second finger, third finger, second finger. So I'm just going to go up the chord shape and come back down. And it's going to work out in 4/4 time. If I was playing 8th notes or 16th notes, I could use this and just repeat it over and over and over again and generate a lot of chaos. So what again I'm doing there is first finger on the 9th fret, first finger on the 12th fret, middle finger on the 10th fret, middle finger on the 13th fret, third finger on the 11th fret, third finger on the 14th fret, and then back down to middle finger 10, middle finger 13. And I'm going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, in order to get this to be, if you just want to generate a whole bunch of noise, you can put this anywhere. If you just want to have a big chaotic bass riff that sticks out for a second, you can just put this wherever the heck you want, as long as you don't mind it not necessarily matching up with what your guitar player is doing. Doesn't matter, you can put it anywhere. If you want it to line up with what your guitar player is doing, you're going to need to start the left-hand part of the riff on whatever fret the guitar player happens to be on. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that your guitar player was doing a big E tritone chord. He was on the 7th fret of the A string. I would put my first finger on the 7th fret of the A string, middle finger on the 8th fret, third finger on the 9th fret, and then using that diminished cycle, that diminished chord trick, I would go up 1, 2, 3 frets. So I would have the first finger of my right hand on the 10th fret of the A string, middle finger on the 11th, third finger on the 12th. If he was on the 9th fret, I could do what I was doing before. If he was on the open A string, let's say, I could take it all the way up to the octave. I could go to the 12th fret here with my first finger, go up 1, 2, 3 with my first finger of the right hand, so I'm on 12 and 15. 13, 16, 14, 17. And again, the cool thing about the symmetrical chords is that if I wanted to keep moving this sequence higher and higher, I could, as long as I move all of my both of my hands symmetrically, the same number of frets, and if I keep moving them by minor thirds, by 3 frets at a time, I will actually continue to play the same chord just in a different voicing, which is going to add a little bit of interest. So let's say again I'm on the 9th fret with my left hand and the 12th fret with my right hand. If I want to move this higher, I could move both of my hands up 3 frets, which means my left hand would end up on the 12th fret, my right hand would end up on the 15th fret. And if I wanted to keep going there, my left hand would end up on the 15th fret and my right hand would end up on the 18th fret, and that's about as far as I can go on this bass because I'm about to run out of frets. And I could use this as a sequence here, so I could go from 9 to 12, to 12, 15, to 15, 18. And I could come back down if I wanted to. Messed up a little bit there, but you get the idea. So 9 to 12, 12 and 15, 15 and 18. You do definitely have to practice these because as the frets get smaller, the angle of the hand changes a little bit. You really got to aim. You might actually have to peek over the bass and look at it. But there you go, a way to generate some cool, easy tapping noises, either just general chaos in your bass riffs, or to match up with your guitar player doing this kind of 3-finger large tritone chord. Now I can modify this. That riff worked in 4/4 time, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and if I wanted to modify this for 3/4 time, if I was doing, say, groups of triplets or just groups of 3, the easiest way would be to just leave out that second middle finger, the one that brings you on the way down. You'd be constantly ascending. We would go 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3. And that would be it. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3, and 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 you could do the same sequence here, even though we're in a different time signature. Now what I like to do when I'm doing this kind of 3/4 feel or this triplet feel here, I like to extend the sequence just to get a little more time in each location, get a little more mileage out of the riff. So what I do there is I ascend, I go 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. Then I come down to the second finger, back up to the third finger, and back down to the second finger. So what I get is 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2. And this one I find pretty easy to do quickly as well once you get it under control. And you can also move this one in sequence as well. And then the final one I'm going to show you is, before I talk about the additional chord you can use on this one, the final one I'm going to show you is one that is going to generate the absolute maximum of noise, and that's where rather than starting with your first finger, you're actually going to start with your third finger up here, and you're actually, rather than doing alternating the same finger on the different hands, you're actually going to complete a motion with each hand back and forth. And what I'm talking about is that particular riff. This, again, the simplest one. Your fingers naturally want to do this. If you've ever sat there and just kind of at a table or a desk or something and just kind of fiddled with your finger, you probably notice that you tend to go from the pinky side of the hand when you're drumming your fingers down to the pointer finger side of the hand. So we're going to take advantage of this natural motion of the hands. And in the left hand, we're going to go 3, 2, 1. And in the right hand, we're also going to go 3, 2, 1. And we're going to alternate between those two hands back and forth. And this is definitely something you want to practice slowly, because otherwise, when you go to do it faster, you're just going to get kind of random fingers hitting the fingerboard, and you're not going to get too many notes. You're just going to get a lot of noise like that, a lot of clicking rather than... which is what we're going for in this particular riff. This one you can also move in the sequence, the 3-fret sequence. But because this one's so chaotic, and we're already generating a whole lot of dissonance and tension, this one, if you noticed in the intro, I like to move this one by frets sometimes, just single frets. So I'm just moving the whole sequence by 1 fret at a time. 9 to 12, 10 to 13, 11 to 14, 12 to 15. And that really generates that building tension there. I could also go up and down, back and forth, say up a fret, back down, down a fret, back up. Or you could kind of just let it turn into the spider crawl of chaos there. But there you go. There are 3 simple riffs using diminished chords that you can throw into your playing, and if you ever need just a burst of dissonance, this is a quick, easy way to do it. The last thing I want to talk about chord-wise is there is another symmetrical chord in Western music theory, and that is the augmented chord. The diminished chord, which is what we've been using here, is comprised entirely of minor thirds, whereas the augmented chord is the opposite of that. It's comprised entirely of major thirds. Now, a major third is 1/2 step bigger than a minor third. So if a minor third is the distance of 3 frets, a major third would be a distance of 4 frets. And I can actually use this exact same technique and just space my hands out a little bit farther if I wanted to use augmented chords, if I wanted to use major thirds rather than minor thirds. So again, a diminished chord sounds like that. It's all minor thirds. An augmented chord, on the other hand, is actually a little easier if I go this way. So that's all major thirds. Tritones would be, or diminished chords would be. Augmented chords, on the other hand, major thirds. They're both very, very tense. They're both very ominous if you use them correctly, but they do have a slightly different sound, and you can kind of pick and choose which one you want to use. Unless if your guitar player is playing full chords with particular tonalities that you have to match up with, you definitely want to go in that direction. But if they're just using simple 1-finger power chords or the 2-finger power chords, and they don't really have a major or a minor sound, you can make the decision as to whether or not you're going to use diminished or augmented style chords. So augmented, or major thirds, if I was on the 9th fret, again, instead of being on the 12th fret with my right hand, I'd be up on the 13th fret, because a major third is a 1/2 step larger, 1/2 step higher than a minor third. So they sound very similar. They're both very tense, but a diminished chord, all minor thirds, as opposed to an augmented chord, all major thirds. If you've ever seen, been watching TV or a movie and there's a flashback sequence and they have that, it's usually based around an augmented chord. It's usually a little bit more musical than that, but you get the idea. But again, you can do whichever sequence. You can use the exact same sequence that you used on the diminished chords for this one as well. You can do the 4. You can do the 3. Or you can do the extended 3. And you can also move this one around as long as you make sure that you move your hands the same number of frets. Both hands move the same number of frets. So if I wanted to move by major thirds and I was on 9 and 13, the 9th fret hand would come up to 13. The 13th fret hand would come up to 17. 13 plus 4 is 17. And this one's a little trickier to move around just because the distances are larger, but the same principle applies. So there you go. Just to recap, we've got the diminished chord, which is 3 frets apart, comprised entirely of minor thirds. We've got our sequence where we're going 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. We're generally going to use the same pair of fingers each time. That's not necessary. It's something you can experiment with, but the easiest way to just get this right out of the gate is to allow the fingers to follow each other, to group the index fingers, the middle fingers, and the ring fingers together. We can move by sequence thanks to the diminished cycle. Put very, very simply, all diminished chords are more or less the same. Or rather, there are only 3 diminished chords that we can deal with, and the other ones are just inversions of the original 3. We can move by minor thirds like that. We can move by frets. We can do the descending 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1 to really make a lot of noise. We can stretch this out to augmented chords, which are all major thirds rather than minor thirds. We can also do the chaotic 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1 there. And if we want this to be a little more musical, we need to line up the left hand fret with what our guitar player is doing. If the guitar player's playing a power chord, say on the 5th fret, we want to put our left hand on the 5th fret as well. If he's on the 9th fret, we want to put our left hand on the 9th fret as well. If he's playing particular chords, diminished chords, augmented chords, major, minor, whatever it is, we want to try to line up the tonality with him. But if he's just playing power chords, you have a lot more freedom as a bass player. You can decide what the harmony is, which means you could switch between the diminished or the augmented chords at your pleasure, whichever one happens to sound good for you. But put very simply, this is a quick and easy way to get tapping into your playing without having to sit there and work on all these two-handed scales. Now, if you want to be a little more musical, if you want to play melodies, yes, you're going to need to sit down and practice your scales with 2 hands and learn all of that good stuff. But if you just want to make a whole bunch of noise, maybe tick some people off, this is a great way that you can get together probably in 5 or 10 minutes of simple practice. So there it is, guys. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you did, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future updates. You can also leave me a comment or a question down there, or a request for a lesson or a song that you would like to learn. I do my best to get back to those. Don't have a transcription for this one, unfortunately, but just go back and check out the lesson again if you want a refresher, or again, ask me a question. I can try to shed some light on any of the parts that were confusing. And until next time,